The worst pain wasn't the fever, the kind that made my teeth ache and my skin crawl. It wasn't the deep, bone-weary fatigue that left me too weak to even lift a glass of water. It wasn't even the nausea that kept me curled up on the bathroom floor for hours. The worst pain wasn't physical at all. It was watching my sister, Sarah, point a perfectly manicured finger towards the front door of the house I grew up in, and hearing my mother, the woman who tucked me in at night and soothed my childhood fevers, say with a sigh of weary impatience, "Sarah's right, Ryan. You need to go. Now." I was sick. Really sick. It had started subtly, just feeling run down after losing my job. A job loss that was actually because of the initial symptoms, though I didn't know it then. It turned into a persistent, nasty virus that doctors had trouble diagnosing, leaving me weak, disoriented, and barely able to function. My small emergency fund had evaporated covering basic bills while I was too sick to work, and medical tests that weren't fully covered by my minimal insurance after losing my job. With literally nowhere else to go, no partner, no savings left, I'd swallowed my pride and moved back into my childhood bedroom at my parents' house. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of feeling like a burden. 3 weeks of watching my sister Sarah look at me with thinly veiled disgust. Sarah, who was living comfortably, rent-free in her old room too, saving money while she figured things out after quitting her last job because she didn't like her boss. Sarah, who had never faced a day of real hardship in her life, shielded by our parents' endless indulgence. I was in the living room, huddled under a blanket on the sofa, shivering despite the mild spring weather outside, trying to watch some TV. Sarah walked in, back from lunch with friends, looking vibrant and annoyed. "Still here?" she said, her voice sharp. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yeah, Sarah, still got this fever," I managed, my voice rough. She threw her hands up, exasperated. "Oh, for God's sake, Ryan! It's been weeks! I can't have you moping around, coughing on everything. My friends are coming over tomorrow for brunch. I don't want them seeing this. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing? Me, my sickness, my presence. "Sarah, I'm not moping," I said, trying to sit up. "I'm actually sick. I'm barely contagious anymore," the doctor said. "I don't care what the doctor said. You look awful. And honestly, it's just inconvenient having you here all the time. I need my space. Mom! Dad!" she yelled, summoning our parents from the kitchen with a tone that demanded immediate action. Mom and Dad came in, wiping their hands on dish towels. They saw me on the couch, saw Sarah standing there with her arms crossed, a look of furious entitlement on her face. They knew exactly what this was about. "What's going on?" Dad asked, though he already knew. "I want Ryan out," Sarah stated flatly, pointing at me, then at the door. "He's still sick. He's just lying around, and I can't have him here when my friends come over. It's not fair to me." I looked at my parents pleadingly. Surely they wouldn't agree? Not now. Not when I was still weak. Mom sighed, that familiar sigh that always preceded her choosing Sarah's comfort over my needs. "Well, Ryan," she started, avoiding my eyes. "Sarah has a point. You have been here a few weeks, and you are disrupting things." Disrupting things? I felt a jolt of adrenaline cutting through the fatigue. "Mom, Dad, I'm sick. I lost my job because of this. I have nowhere else to go right now." "You can figure something out," Dad said, his voice firm, shutting down any argument. "You're a grown man, Ryan. You need to be more independent. You can't rely on us forever." "But I'm sick," I repeated, the injustice of it fueling my voice. "You're kicking me out while I'm sick?" "It's just a little bug. Get over it," Sarah scoffed. "Honestly, you're so dramatic." "This isn't dramatic, Sarah. This is me needing a safe place to recover." "The safest place for everyone," Mom interjected, her tone final, "is for you to find somewhere else to stay, just until you're back on your feet. It's time, Ryan." "Time?" I looked at Sarah, perfectly healthy, living here without contributing. What about Sarah? She's living here too, not working, just going out with friends. That's different, Dad said instantly, instinctively defending Sarah. Sarah is figuring things out. She needs a base. You need to stand on your own 2 feet. My throat tightened. Tears, hot and humiliating, pricked at my eyes. They were choosing her, again, over my basic need for shelter and care while I was vulnerable. Fine, I choked out, pulling the blanket off. Fine, I'll go. You need to understand. This wasn't a sudden shift. This was the culmination of decades of a deeply ingrained family dynamic. Sarah, my older sister, was always the easy one, the one who fit the mold. Pretty, popular, got decent grades without trying too hard, always knew what she wanted, or what she thought she wanted based on what was most desirable at the moment. Our parents adored her, indulged her every whim, smoothed over every bump in her road. If Sarah wanted something, Sarah got it. If Sarah was unhappy, everyone bent over backwards to fix it. I was the sensitive one, the quiet one, the one who struggled more with traditional academics, but saw the world differently, thought outside the box. While Sarah was praised for getting a steady job in marketing after college, a job she later hated and quit, I was embarking on a less conventional path: graphic design, freelance web development, trying to build my own small business. My parents never saw it as a legitimate career. Freelance? Is that even a real job, Danny? They still use my childhood nickname Danny, adding to the feeling of being perpetually young and incapable in their eyes. Your sister has a 401k, dear. Does your online work offer a 401k? If I had a success, they'd minimize it. Oh, that website you built? Looks nice. Sarah's company just launched a new product line. She was instrumental in the marketing campaign. If I had a setback, they'd jump on it as proof of my poor choices. See, this is why you need stability like Sarah. Sarah reveled in it. She wasn't just passively accepting the favoritism, she actively fostered it, played the victim when necessary, always positioning herself as the responsible one, the hardworking one, the one who deserved the parents' support and resources, while subtly or overtly highlighting my perceived failures or struggles. She'd offer advice that sounded more like criticism, or express concern that felt like judgment. Even the house itself was a point of unspoken contention. It was a nice, comfortable suburban home they'd owned for 30 years. Sarah always talked about it as our house, in a way that implied joint ownership, even though she hadn't contributed financially to it as an adult. There was a quiet understanding, never explicitly stated, but always felt, that Sarah was the one who would likely end up with the bulk of the parents' assets, perhaps even the house itself, because she was the responsible one, the one who would maintain it, the one who deserved it. My less conventional life, my lack of a traditional career path, made me seem less deserving, less capable of handling significant assets in their eyes. When I got sick, I truly had nowhere else to go. My illness hit hard and fast. I couldn't work. My income stopped. My apartment lease was ending, and I didn't have the energy or the money to find a new place and move. Moving back home felt like the only option, a temporary lifeline until I recovered. I swallowed my pride, ignored the voice in my head that knew how they saw me, and asked. They agreed hesitantly. But 3 weeks was apparently too long. My weakness, my neediness, my mere presence was an inconvenience to Sarah, who valued her comfort and social life above all else. And our parents, in their ingrained pattern of prioritizing Sarah's desires, saw me not as a sick son needing care, but as an obstacle to Sarah's happiness, a disruptive element in their otherwise carefully managed family facade. Packing while sick is a special kind of misery. Every movement was an effort. My head pounded, my body ached, my emotional state was worse. Disbelief warred with the deep, stinging pain of feeling utterly rejected by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They stood there, Mom and Dad, watching me stuff clothes haphazardly into duffel bags, offering no help, no kind words, just a pervasive air of wanting me gone. Just leave the spare key on the counter, Dad said, his voice flat. Make sure you take all your things, Mom added, as if I might intentionally leave something behind to spite them. Sarah stayed in the living room, probably scrolling on her phone, the picture of unconcern. I managed to pack 2 duffel bags in my laptop backpack. It was all I could carry. Getting into my old sputtering car felt like an athletic feat. Driving felt dangerous. Where did I go? I couldn't afford a hotel for more than maybe one night if I skipped meals. I didn't want to burden my friends, who had their own lives, their own limited space. I ended up calling an old college friend, Mike. Mike was one of the few people who never judged my career path, who just accepted me for who I was. I mumbled an explanation, feeling the heat of shame on my face even over the fever. Mike, bless him, didn't ask questions. Dude, come over. I've got a couch. Don't worry about anything. Just get here. I drove to Mike's small apartment across town. The relief of being in a safe place, away from the judgment and rejection, was immense, but the physical and emotional toll was crushing. I spent the next few days mostly on Mike's sofa, sleeping, coughing, trying to piece together a plan, while battling the lingering effects of the virus and the deep wound of my family's abandonment. Mike was incredibly kind. He brought me soup, checked my fever, just let me be. But I couldn't stay on his couch forever. I was still weak, couldn't work, and every day the reality of my situation grew bleaker. Medical bills were piling up. My bank account was almost empty. I felt completely adrift, cast out by my own blood. I tried calling my parents a few days later. Mom answered, but her voice was guarded. "Oh, Ryan, are you feeling better?" I said I was getting there, slowly. I asked hesitantly about coming back once I was fully recovered. "We'll see, dear," she said vaguely. "Things are just easier with Sarah here on her own. Less disruption." It wasn't just about my sickness. It was about Sarah's preference, about my fundamental presence being inconvenient. I called Dad. He was even less sympathetic. "Look, Ryan, this is for your own good. You rely too much on us. It's time you learn to handle things yourself. This is a push you needed." A push? A push off a cliff while I was already stumbling. I didn't even try calling Sarah. I knew what I'd get, either silence or cold justification. The feeling of isolation was absolute. My own family, my supposed safety net, had not only failed to catch me when I fell, they had actively pushed me away. The betrayal cut deeper than just homelessness. It was a rejection of me, the person, the son, the brother. I was disposable. I remember one particularly low moment. I was at a laundromat washing the few clothes I had managed to grab. My fever was down, but I was still weak, dizzy. I fumbled with the coins, dropped them on the dirty floor. I just stood there for a second, staring at the scattered quarters, the fluorescent lights buzzing, the stale smell of detergent, and the sheer crushing weight of my situation hit me. Sick, broke, effectively homeless, abandoned by family. I felt utterly worthless, foolish for ever believing they were truly there for me, completely alone in the world. That was rock bottom. Standing in that grimy laundromat, watching those coins roll away, something shifted inside me. The despair was still there, a heavy cloak, but underneath it, the ember of anger ignited into a cold, steady flame. That anger wasn't just at Sarah for her cruelty, or at my parents for their weakness and favoritism. It was at the fundamental injustice of it all, at decades of being measured and found wanting, at having my struggles used as proof of my inadequacy while Sarah's whims were catered to. They thought I was weak. They thought I was dependent. They thought they could just discard me when I was inconvenient, secure in the knowledge that I'd eventually just figure it out and disappear from their perfectly managed lives. In that moment, surrounded by spinning washing machines and fluorescent glare, a fierce, cold resolve solidified. They want me gone? Fine. But they won't get away with it. They won't get to feel good about their decision, won't get to sweep me under the rug and pretend I don't exist, won't get to justify their actions as being for my own good, while Sarah continues to take up space and resources they deny me. They chose to abandon me at my lowest. I would remember that, and I would fight back, not with anger or violence, but with intelligence, with quiet determination, and in a way they would never, ever see coming. I picked up the scattered coins, fed them into the machine. As it started to spin, a single clear thought formed. They thought they could just kick me out of the house? Fine, I'll just have to buy it. That thought, initially absurd, became my anchor. Buy the house? The house my parents owned? The house Sarah felt entitled to? It seemed impossible. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the ultimate, perfect answer. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my place, about proving my capability, not with words, but with an action they couldn't dismiss, an action that would directly address their act of expulsion and Sarah's entitlement. The first step was regaining my health. With Mike's quiet support, I focused on recovery. Rest, proper food, getting back on my feet. It took longer than I expected, weeks of slow progress, but the fire of my new resolve kept me going. The second step was financial recovery. This was the hardest part. I was starting from less than zero, with medical bills and no income. I couldn't go back to my old freelance model right away. It was too unpredictable. I needed stability. I found a remote contract job, leveraging some of my web development skills for a small company. It wasn't exciting, but it was steady income. I worked every hour I could, even when I was still feeling residual weakness. I lived as frugally as humanly possible. Mike wouldn't let me pay rent for the first couple of months, which was a lifesaver, but I insisted on covering groceries and utilities. I saved every penny. As my health improved and my savings slowly grew, I started researching. Not just job boards. I researched real estate, specifically my parents' house. I found online public records, tax assessments, property deeds, showing my parents' names, Tom and Carol Hayes, as the owners. I looked at market values in the neighborhood. I started to understand the local real estate landscape. I also started researching my parents' financial situation discreetly. I knew bits and pieces from overheard conversations over the years. Dad's retirement was okay, but not spectacular. Mom had some health issues that required ongoing treatment. They weren't wealthy by any means. They were comfortable, but likely asset-rich, in the house, and cash poor, especially with Sarah living there rent-free. This gave me an idea. Through careful, quiet inquiries, asking questions to distant relatives who were more sympathetic to me than Sarah, looking through old family papers I'd grabbed when I left, checking publicly available databases related to property liens, I discovered something significant. My parents had quietly taken out a relatively large home equity line of credit, HELOC, a few years ago, likely for renovations or other expenses they hadn't mentioned. The balance was substantial, and the interest payments, while manageable when they were both fully healthy and employed, might be becoming a quiet burden as they got older and faced unexpected costs, like Mom's health issues, maybe supporting Sarah. The house wasn't just an asset. It was also a source of quiet debt. This was key. It meant the house wasn't just a symbol of their stability. It was also potentially a financial pressure point. It might make them open to a proposition they wouldn't have considered otherwise. The thought of buying the house solidified into a daring, complex plan. It wasn't about forcing them out. It was about acquiring ownership legally, fair and square, turning their asset into my control, and doing it in a way that blindsided Sarah and exposed the consequences of their actions. I needed help, not from family, obviously. I needed professional, discreet help. I found a real estate lawyer known for handling potentially complex or sensitive transactions. I also consulted with a financial advisor who understood real estate investment and leverage. I laid out the entire situation: my family history, being kicked out while sick, the parents' HELOC, Sarah's entitlement regarding the house, and my goal to legally acquire the property. They listened, initially skeptical, but intrigued by the unique motivation and the potential complexity. So, you want to buy the house out from under your sister's expectations, essentially leveraging your parents' debt. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Evelyn Reed, summarized. It's aggressive and potentially very complicated, emotionally and legally. They chose to put me out when I was sick and had nowhere to go, I said, my voice flat. They chose to prioritize Sarah's comfort over my well-being. This isn't just about real estate for me. It's about taking back control and showing them the consequences of that choice. We developed a strategy. I would continue working, saving aggressively, improving my credit score. I would also quietly explore financing options to acquire the property, either buying it outright, if they were willing to sell, or potentially acquiring the HELOC debt and using it as leverage, or finding some other legal mechanism to facilitate a purchase. The goal was to build my financial capacity to a point where I could present a legitimate, compelling offer to buy the house, one that would solve their potential financial burden, the HELOC, while transferring ownership to me. This entire process was kept in absolute secrecy from my family. I still took their calls sporadically, keeping conversations light and superficial. I'd say I was doing better, found some contract work, was staying with friends. I deflected any questions about where I was living or my long-term plans. They seemed content with the vague answers, probably relieved I wasn't asking for money or a place to stay anymore. They didn't ask about my health much anymore either. It was clear they had moved on, back into their comfortable world where I wasn't an inconvenient presence. Over the next year and a half, my life became a relentless cycle of working, saving, learning, and planning. My health fully recovered, leaving me with a newfound appreciation for physical well-being. My remote contract work turned into a full-time position with a good salary and benefits. I continued freelancing on the side, working nights and weekends. Every extra dollar went into a dedicated savings account. I also invested heavily in learning. I took online courses in real estate finance, property management, legal aspects of real estate. I wasn't just accumulating money, I was accumulating knowledge and expertise, the kind they never thought I'd be interested in or capable of understanding. I was building a new foundation for myself, brick by brick, far away from their critical gaze. The memory of being kicked out, of standing in that laundromat with scattered coins, of Mike's kindness, and of my family's cold dismissal, fueled me every single day. It was a powerful, constant reminder of what I was fighting for. Not just financial security, but self-respect, dignity, and a final, irrefutable answer to their decades of doubt. My financial advisor helped me explore mortgage options, leveraging my now solid income and growing savings. Ms. Reed worked on the legal strategy, how to structure an offer that would be appealing to my parents, by resolving the HELOC debt, but legally sound, and ultimately transfer full ownership to me, bypassing any informal expectations Sarah might have had about inheriting it or controlling it. We had to be patient. We waited for the right moment. We tracked market values, interest rates, and kept a quiet eye on my parents' property tax records, which are public, for any signs of increased financial pressure. My internal state transformed from wounded despair to a quiet, almost serene determination. The initial raw pain of betrayal was still there, a scar I carried, but it no longer dictated my emotions. It was a reminder, a motivator, but not a source of crippling sadness. There was a deep satisfaction in building this new life, this new strength, entirely on my own, without their help, without their knowledge. Every dollar saved, every new skill mastered, every step closer to my goal felt like a victory against the narrative they had imposed on me. The secrecy was sometimes difficult, but it also felt empowering. They had no idea what I was doing, what I was capable of. They still thought of me as the same person they had kicked out, sick, broke, dependent. That underestimation was my greatest advantage. I was operating in a different league now, understanding complex financial and legal structures that were likely beyond their grasp, certainly beyond Sarah's. The anticipation of the reveal wasn't about gloating cruelly, though there was a small, undeniable part of me that relished the shock. It was about a profound public act of justice, a rebalancing of the scales after decades of imbalance. It was about finally being seen, not because I demanded it, but because the reality of my achievement would make it impossible for them to look away or dismiss me ever again. After almost 2 years of planning, saving, and careful preparation, the moment arrived. Market conditions were favorable, my financial position was strong, and we learned that my parents were facing some unexpected expenses related to Dad's health. Ms. Reed advised that now was the time. We prepared the offer. It was a complex legal document, but the essence was simple. I, Ryan Hayes, through a newly formed discrete LLC, was offering to purchase their property for fair market value. The offer was structured in a way that the existing HELOC debt would be paid off entirely from the sale proceeds, freeing them from that burden, and they would receive a substantial lump sum payment for the remaining equity, providing them with financial security for their retirement and health needs. It was a clean, legal, financially sound offer. Ms. Reed sent the offer letter directly to my parents' home via certified mail. I did not contact them beforehand. I wanted the offer, the reality of what I was doing, to land without preamble, without them being able to deflect or prepare. The phone calls started that evening. First Mom, bewildered and hesitant. "Ryan, we got a letter from a lawyer about the house." "What is this?" I explained calmly that it was an offer to purchase their property. She was stunned, unable to process it. Then Dad called, his voice sharper, more suspicious. "Ryan, what are you playing at? Buy the house? Where would you even get that kind of money?" I told him I had secured financing and was making a legitimate offer. He was clearly disoriented by this unexpected move from the son he viewed as financially unstable. They talked to Miss Reed. She explained the details, the fair market value, the payoff of the HELOC, the substantial equity they would receive. It addressed their financial worries directly, offering a concrete solution to a potential problem they hadn't even discussed openly with me. It was a compelling offer, purely on financial terms. They deliberated for a few weeks. Sarah, I later learned, was furious when she found out about the offer, seeing it as an unthinkable betrayal by me, and arguing fiercely against it, probably reminding them of her expectations regarding the house. But Ms. Reed emphasized the financial benefits for their retirement and health needs, painting a clear picture of their future without the debt burden. My parents, faced with a pragmatic financial decision that secured their future versus Sarah's entitled expectations and my history of being a burden, made a choice. This time, the choice wasn't entirely about Sarah's comfort. It was about their own security, offered by the son they had dismissed. They accepted the offer. The process was quiet, handled legally through the attorneys, paperwork, inspections, financing approval. It took a few more weeks. And then the deal closed. The house legally transferred ownership. My name, or rather my LLC's name, was on the deed. I was the owner. I didn't tell my family the closing was happening. I waited. I planned my moment. The time was a few weeks after the closing. My parents were still living in the house temporarily, as part of the agreement allowing them time to find a new place. Sarah was still there too. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where families are supposed to have brunch or relax together. I drove over. I hadn't been inside the house since the day I was kicked out. I was dressed simply, casually, but feeling healthier, stronger, and more composed than I had in years. I carried a single envelope. I walked up to the front door, the door I had been pointed toward and told to leave. I didn't use the key. I rang the doorbell. Sarah opened the door. She looked surprised to see me. Her expression immediately shifted to annoyance, then suspicion. "Ryan, what do you want?" she asked, blocking the doorway slightly. "I thought we agreed you'd call before coming over." "I'm not really coming over, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and even. "I'm here for something official." Mom and Dad appeared behind her, looking confused and wary. "Ryan, is everything all right?" Mom asked. I looked at them, the three faces that had decided I was less important than an inconvenience, less deserving than Sarah's whims. I remembered the fever, the cold night, the laundromat, the years of dismissal. All of it culminated in this single moment. I held up the envelope. "I'm here," I said, my voice clear and firm, resonating in the entryway. "To deliver this notice," Sarah scoffed. "A notice? What are you talking about?" I looked directly at Sarah, then at my parents, who were now looking increasingly anxious. "As the legal owner of this property," I stated, watching their faces, "I am here to serve you with a formal notice." Sarah's eyes widened. My parents exchanged a look of utter confusion. Legal owner? What was I talking about? I looked specifically at Sarah, the sister who had pointed to this very door and demanded I be removed. "Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "You screamed when I handed you the eviction notice." I had photocopied a standard eviction notice and addressed it to Sarah Hayes, listing the property address. It wasn't strictly necessary. My parents would be handling moving, and Sarah would have to leave with them. But it was symbolic, a direct legal consequence for her specific act of trying to remove me from my home. Sarah froze for a second, processing my words. "Eviction notice? What are you talking about? You don't own this house. Mom, Dad." "Yes, Sarah," I said, stepping forward slightly, extending the envelope towards her. "I do. As of date of closing, specific month and year, I purchased the property from Mom and Dad." Her eyes fixated on the envelope, then on my face. Realization dawned, horrific and undeniable. The offer, the lawyers, my parents' deliberations. It all clicked into place. And the implication that I owned the house, and she, the entitled one who demanded my removal, was now subject to my authority regarding this property, hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her face contorted. "No!" she shrieked, a raw animal sound of pure rage and disbelief. She didn't take the envelope. She slapped at it, sending it fluttering to the floor. "You didn't! You can't! You pathetic loser! You bought my house!" She was screaming now, truly screaming, her face red, veins standing out on her neck, all pretense of politeness gone, replaced by naked entitlement and fury. "You were sick. You were broke. You were living on couches. How dare you? This was supposed to be my house, my inheritance. You stole it." My parents just stood there, stunned, watching Sarah's meltdown, watching me stand calmly in the eye of the storm in the house I now owned. They saw the consequences of their actions, the monster their favoritism had helped create, and the quiet strength of the son they had underestimated. They didn't scream. They looked shell-shocked, horrified by Sarah's display, and perhaps, just perhaps, beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. "I didn't steal it, Sarah," I said, my voice still calm, picking up the fallen envelope. "I bought it, fair and square, with money I earned, building a life for myself after my own family kicked me out when I was sick and vulnerable." I looked at my parents. "Remember? You told me to be independent, to stand on my own 2 feet, to figure it out myself." Well, I did. And it turns out, standing on my own 2 feet allowed me to walk right back in and buy the place you threw me out of. I handed the envelope to my mother this time. "This is for Sarah," I said. "As the new owner, I'm formally giving notice. You and Sarah have number weeks from the closing date to vacate the premises, as per the purchase agreement." The scene was chaotic. Sarah continued to scream, shifting from rage to tearful accusations, directed at me, at our parents. How could you sell it? To him? Pacing wildly in the entryway of the house I now owned. My parents were trying to calm her down, while simultaneously looking at me with a mixture of fear and a reluctant awe. The legal mechanism was solid. I had purchased the property outright from my parents. The money I paid covered the payoff of their HELOC and provided them with significant funds for their retirement and health care. It was a mutually agreed upon transaction, legally binding. Sarah had no legal standing regarding the property. Her claim was based purely on her own expectations and a sense of entitlement fostered by our parents. My eviction notice to her was legally valid. The immediate aftermath was painful, dramatic, and for me, a strange mix of exhaustion and vindication. Sarah had to move out with my parents. She lost her expected inheritance, or at least that significant piece of it. She had to face the reality that the brother she dismissed as a failure had achieved a level of financial and personal autonomy that put him in control of a situation she believed was hers by right. The screaming fit was the explosive release of years of entitlement, colliding with undeniable reality. My parents had to grapple with the consequences of their favoritism and their decision to kick me out. They had secured their own financial future, but at the cost of fundamentally changing the family dynamic and exposing the deep-seated issues their indulgence of Sarah had created. They saw my strength, my capability, but also the distance their actions had created. My position was clear. I was healthy, financially independent, and the legal owner of the property that had been the stage for so much of our family's dysfunction and my own pain. My dignity, which had been stripped away when I was kicked out while sick, was fully restored. I hadn't just survived, I had triumphed, using their own system, property ownership, legal contracts, financial security, against the very act that was meant to render me powerless. Living in the house was strange at first. Every room held memories, childhood moments, teenage angst, the painful weeks of my illness, and finally, the scene of the confrontation. But as I renovated it, properly this time, not just quick fixes, using my design skills and financial resources, the old memories faded, replaced by the present reality of a space that was truly mine, a testament to my resilience. I didn't kick my parents out onto the street. The purchase agreement had given them a reasonable time frame to find a new place, which they did, a smaller condo better suited for them. My relationship with them is complicated. They are humbled, apologetic in their way, clearly impressed by my financial success, which they now talk about constantly to anyone who will listen, a complete 180 from their previous dismissal. But the trust, the easy connection, is gone. We have a relationship, phone calls, occasional visits, at my invitation, on my terms. But the deep, unconditional family bond was broken. That day I was kicked out. They see me differently, but they don't fully understand the depth of the wound, or the man I had to become to survive it. Sarah is another matter. After the screaming, there was silence. She made no attempt to contact me. I heard through relatives that she was furious about losing her expected inheritance and blamed me and our parents. She hasn't apologized for anything. We have no relationship now, and I don't foresee one. The eviction notice was more than legal. It was a symbolic boundary. She chose to discard me, and I chose to remove her from the space she felt entitled to. Justice, in that sense, felt complete. My life is stable now. My company is doing well. I live in the house I bought, surrounded by the quiet proof of my journey. The mocking words, the dismissal, the pain of being cast out. They still echo sometimes, but they are quieter now, distant. They tried to break me at my weakest moment. Instead, they gave me the fuel I needed to build my strongest self. My sister kicked me out of the house when I was sick, and my parents supported her, choosing her comfort over my vulnerability. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about independence or simply removing an inconvenience. They never imagined that the sick, broke son they cast out would return, not begging for entry, but holding the deed to the house they lived in. She screamed when I handed her the eviction notice, the culmination of her entitlement colliding with the reality of my hard-won independence and strategic countermove. It was the hardest, most painful experience of my life, but it forced me to build my own foundation, brick by brick, belief by belief, until I was strong enough to walk back through that door on my own terms, not as a burden, but as the owner. Now, thinking about my story, about being abandoned by your family at your lowest point, kicked out while sick, and then working years in secret to achieve financial independence and legally take control of the asset that represented their betrayal and your sister's entitlement. If you were in my position, after achieving this ultimate act of justice and regaining control, would you choose to A. Use the legal control of the house as leverage to force a reconciliation with your family, perhaps offering them continued access or support from a position of power, hoping to rebuild a relationship? Or B. Consider the legal and emotional scales balanced, maintain polite but clear boundaries with your parents, and cut ties completely with the sister who directly caused you harm, prioritizing your own peace and moving forward without them? What would you do?